when it comes to anything belief-based, being completely 100% certain is not helpful.
What happens when a Christian, a mystic, and an agnostic walk into a bar? It's no joke.
I think critical thinking is heavily absent from church spaces.
Hang on, it doesn't get me to God. This must be nonsense.
It's the start of a real conversation.
Don't shy away from the reality.
Exactly.
That's what you
But
do.
then I think...
You don't shy away from the fact that Christianity has been exploited.
3 ways of seeing the world, 1 bar, and all the questions that connect us. Pull up a stall and see who's walking into my bar. So today we are talking about the uncomfortable possibility of what if we are wrong. So introduce yourselves and tell me what your beliefs are.
I'm a Christian, but more of a deconstructed academic Christian.
I'm an agnostic theist. I believe in a God, but I don't know whether there's any evidence to say that it actually exists.
You could say that I'm a mystic, and I've landed in a place as a practicing astrologer, although I think of astrology as something a bit more like cooking than a belief system.
All right, so tell me why you all believe that your belief is the correct one.
I don't. As soon as you think you know something, you're stepping into God's place, and only God is God.
See, I find it quite interesting because maybe it's just not I don't know much about the mystic world, right? I've always just assumed that it was more to do with the universe and, you know, the sun, the stars, when things are aligning. But you've mentioned God quite a few times.
In the spiritual but not religious space, this like spiritual but not religious space that's sort of come about in the last 10, 15 years or so, people don't necessarily want to step into using that word because it triggers people, right? The very word God becomes something that triggers all of those thoughts and feelings. And so instead we have words like universe, source, the divine, the sacred, this kind of thing.
Right.
I believe my way is the right way for me. I was grown up in a Pentecostal church, both parents in ministry, parents pastors. So I have to recognize that the only reason I am Christian is because I was born in a Christian household. Obviously, when you come of age, you start questioning, I would hope that you start questioning a lot of things or engaging critically in certain things. And I say Christianity is the way for me. My faith was engaged through Christ.
I don't assert that my belief is the correct belief. I grew up in a very religious household, a Christian background. So I was always taught Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and this is all that you need to...
Of John.
Yeah, exactly. So
Thank you.
This is the...
You're going to be our fact checker.
Love that.
This is the only way that you need to be going on. And I lived that life until I was in my early 20s, and I realized, oh, there's actually quite a few things that don't really make a lot of sense. And I think to be able to do that, there is a level of humility to be able to actually decide that maybe I'm not correct.
So Shem, earlier you mentioned that obviously you've been brought up in the Christian household, but there were times where you questioned your belief. What were those things you started to question?
I was always a very curious child. So why does the Bible say this? And who put that in the Bible? And if God is saying that, then why am I seeing this? But for me, it was in my lived experiences where I'm like seeing the way the world is being ran. I'm seeing the damage a lot of religion is doing in causing wars, in causing genocides, and causing slavery. And I'm like, is this still something I want to subscribe to? I feel like if I'm going to believe this and if I'm going to claim to be a Christian, I have to engage critically with this. And if I have to walk away, then I walk away.
I think I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned how important it is to actually critically think, because I found in my experience a lot of people who are religious, when it comes to critical thinking, they kind of get a bit defensive when you ask questions. Have you found that there's been a disconnect between what you've learned so far when you've been looking at things from a critical lens and your identity as a Christian?
I think critical thinking is heavily absent from church spaces. I would say to the point where I think it's even discouraged to engage your thoughts.
I would agree.
I like this analogy. If I'm interested in someone and I want to get to know them and I want to date them, am I just going to get the Instagram filtered version of them, or do I actually want to meet that person up close and personal and see the flaws, see the blemishes? I think that's how people, especially Christians, should should sit with their relationship with God and their religion to say, I don't want this Instagram filtered version of the Bible that is very pretty. I want to engage critically and I want to see things for what they really are.
Do you think that links back to like slavery when
absolutely. Absolutely. Anything that human hands can get a hold of turns into a means of control. And there has to be a distinction and a separation of that.
And a recognition of it, right?
And a recognition of it.
Yeah.
You know, when we say separate it, and sometimes I see this a lot where people are like, oh, I don't consider myself like a Christian, I consider myself like a follower of Christ. Sometimes I do have issues with that. Only people use that as an excuse to kind of not look at what religion is actually done currently in this world. Obviously, as a woman, the Bible has been used to subjugate women as well. So as much as it'll be like, oh, it's about Christ, people are taking the Bible as a whole, and there's verses in there that, you know, actually advocate for the, you know,
for the
oppression
subjugation
of women.
And not just that, like there's one theory in feminist theological theory that says that the reason the Bible was compiled at that time and by those people was on purpose to edit out the stories of powerful Christian women who were there at the early church. It was like, how can we get it so we can get these women silenced? I tell you what, we'll stick it all in a book and we'll only put the men's story in the book. And then that way the women, their story just like goes off to oral history, gets lost. We, you know, call their favourite one a prostitute or whatever. You know, we do a bunch of things, and the only thing that remains is this story of men.
Do we think that we can have doubt and certainty together? Or do you need to have one or the other? Can you be a Christian but also have doubt?
Absolutely. I think this idea of faith kind of erases all kind of doubt.
Yeah.
It's nonsense. I recognise that the Bible was written from a lot of patriarchal standpoints, and there's a lot of theological groundwork being done in universities from thought leaders in women in feminist theology, from Black theology, Black liberation theology, that is undoing the work of patriotism and racism and misogyny within the Bible. I think that balance of doubt and belief comes hand in hand. I think daily you have to question, what do I believe? Yeah. Do I still believe this? I think doubt leads you into questions.
Yeah, that's
and questioning is the best. It's the best way. Curiosity is the best way we encounter God, in my understanding.
But then, how much doubt can you have? Because I guess doubt led Laura far away. Not far away. Sorry, I'm far away over the hill.
It's over.
And then Shem, you're talking about doubt as well, but you seem to have the doubt, and then you match it with your certainty. So then it kind of.
I wouldn't say certainty. I would say I match my doubt with curiosity, and curiosity leads me to inquisitiveness, which is questioning and education.
My doubt is what took me further away, where I was questioning, like, okay, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand this, and et cetera. So how much doubt can you have before you need to kind of just accept that you actually don't necessarily believe in this thing anymore? If I know we're not supposed to humanize like God and faith, but if I had a partner questioning me, oh, are you this? Are you this? After I'll be like, just go, leave me alone. So where's the line?
Balance,
I think the line for me, and I can only talk for myself, speaks more about your own lived experiences, your own encounter. That may not always align with what's in the Bible. That may not always encounter what is written in the text, but your own personal encounters and beliefs that make, you know what, God was really there for me in this moment. And once again, my avenue through faith was Christianity, into understanding and having a relationship with God. So it will always be within that framework.
And I think this is another thing where people's experiences, they use that as, this is why God is real. And I think for me, obviously, that doubt spilled over to me being agnostic. Obviously, why I'm not a Christian anymore. So that balance of doubt and certainty, I do think it's a very interesting question, because I found that when people are really religious, they don't want to explore those doubts, because if they do, they may end up on a path like me.
I agree.
Agnostic.
I think people are scared of it.
You know, as well, there's that kind of fear of a lot of people's identity is in their religion, and you know, like, oh, God said I'm this, God said, Jesus said I'm that, I'm what, you know, people would say this, like, Christ is in me and all of this. And so when, you know, the doubt creeps in. As we're humans, we're gonna have times where we're like, wait, my prayers didn't get answered that day. Like, hold on, like, is God actually real? A lot of times that gets shut down. And obviously, you know the story, you might know the story as well. In the Bible, there was a disciple, actually, Thomas, and they call him Doubting Thomas in the Christian circles because he didn't believe that Jesus actually came back from the dead, and which is understandable in our like context. If someone said, "Oh, someone died,"
You would have questions,
and they came back and they would be like, "Wait, what do you mean?" But in the Christian circles, it's just like, "Oh, he was a doubting Thomas, whatever. He didn't believe in, you know." I think a lot of times that kind of contributes to this culture in the church where people, any doubts that kind of creeps up, it's like, "Oh, no, I need to have more faith, I need to pray more, I need to fast more, I need to get in my scripture more," instead of actually going on that path and kind of exploring their doubts. And I do think, I mean, me personally, I'm biased. I do think when people actually are serious about chasing the doubts and kind of figuring out and researching where those doubts lead them, I do think the chances of deconstructing your faith is very high.
What's beautiful about that story with Thomas is his doubt actually led him to encounter Jesus on a more personal level that the disciples didn't get access to. I think doubt is for me, was a necessary part of my deconstruction in Christianity and growing a better relationship and a better belief in God. Yeah.
Sarah, do you find that studying the universe and not necessarily the Bible, do you think that keeps you more in touch with reality or less in touch with reality?
I look at what people's experiences of reality are, and then I see how the positions of the planets, the asteroids, the sun, the moon, like, because people have been charting the positions of these celestial bodies, what happens on Earth when that one is here, and they've been putting these two things together for literally as long as we have recorded history. Like, some of our oldest moon tracking devices are 40,000 years old, right? So for as long as people have been peopling, people have been like, that one there, I feel sad, you know? So I can, you know, fairly reliably be like, okay, red one's gonna be there. Guys, you're probably gonna feel a bit cross on Thursday. And I see over and over again that there's a relationship between these two. I think that, like, reality is up for grabs for every person in their own experience to define what that means for them. And maybe, because I study astrology, because my idea of reality is so expansive, I can hold an idea of reality that actually does end up holding water. Do you know what I mean?
Right. As a Christian, how do you feel hearing about the stars and, you know, everything being aligned? Surely then it kind of goes against some of the stuff, in the Bible. It's like not...
Does it go against some of the...
doesn't go against things in the Bible.
Does it go against some of the stuff in the Bible?
I think most Christians might think that.
I think most Christians would say that from an ignorant point, which is why I say education in theology is absolutely necessary. I don't think a lot of Christians have even fully read the Bible.
In the Old Testament, it does say, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And that's one of the only places where there's a specific admonition or telling people, if you believe this, then you need to go and have a problem with those people.
Jump back in there. There are scriptures in the Bible, for example, like in the book of Job, which a lot of people read halfway through the book of Job and then stop there when he gets everything back. After that, it starts talking about the Mazzaroth, which is a direct word for zodiac in modern term. It's in the Bible, it's right there. But people have already, I feel like a lot of Christians enter scripture from a place of, I already know what it says, or I'm only taking in what's been said from the pulpit and don't actually read, oh wait, the Bible says it doesn't refer to them as three wise men. It refers to them as magi. Magi being short for magicians. So it is in there.
The story of the zodiac pre-exists the cultures in which the story of Jesus is being told into, and they needed to put it into some story so that people would remember it. So they hook the story of Jesus onto the story of the Zodiac. And this has been analysed. It's a book that I love to read. It's called The Gospel and the Zodiac. And it's and literally like chapter by chapter, it goes through and it's the symbolism first of Aries, then of Taurus, then of Gemini, And the Gospel of John is a Dionysian allegory. And the idea of like pitting these stories together is nonsense to me. It's like being like, I believe in Aladdin, and someone else being like, I believe in Gone with the Wind, let's have a battle. It's like, why? Story upon story upon story tells itself. And like and actually this whole thing where doubt becomes a problem is when we hold on to the story. And who made the story? Man made the story. God did not make the story. God moves the story through us and we tell it.
We are
and as soon as we
storytellers.
hold
We are
on to it,
storytellers,
as soon as we hold on to it, we are holding on to a man-made construction. And that is where the trouble comes in, because then it becomes about the ego of man and not actually divine revelation.
Do we ever think that certainty is dangerous, though?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, just...
I think we all agree on that.
When it comes to anything belief-based, being completely 100% certain is not helpful, because you need to be open to new evidence that comes in, other people's perspectives.
Absolutely.
If we all decided to just be closed in and just be like, I'm not open to anything else, then we're all gonna be in trouble.
So are you willing, if you found that new information, would you be willing to go back to Christianity or join another faith?
If I found credible scientific evidence, then I will consider it. But that has not happened.
But then I guess I would say, like, to take faith, any pathway of faith, as requiring evidence before we step into it, is to misunderstand what faith is. Like, we're talking about stepping into, like, a mythopoetic, self-creating organism that exists across generations and millennia. We're not talking about, like, a scientific system. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm saying, does stepping into this story support me? Does it support my family? Does it help me grow? Does it help me grow my garden? Is it good for my people? Okay, I'll walk with this story for a bit. Nice. I don't want to say that people should or shouldn't do anything, but I would really praise somebody who said, this story is now net negative in my life. I'm going to find a new story. Bless. Like, what's wrong with that?
I think that isn't that a little bit dangerous, though, to constantly switch? Like, if you're constantly switching every time you find something that you don't agree with, and then you go...
Why is that dangerous?
Well, because then you don't ever stick to anything.
But why do you need to stick to something?
Because, OK, so then someone could just walk out on a relationship because they don't like it anymore.
Well, see, love is a very interesting analogy in this moment, right? Love is a very interesting analogy. Like, if we think of our relationship to the divine as a relationship of love, like give and take, we're loving each other, and I think about my spouse, I'll walk with my spouse for as long as there is love. But if I receive something or something happens in our relationship where it's now net negative, there might still be some good bits, but now this has gotten bad, then I think that is the right thing to do to separate, and not to hold on to some vow that I've made that I'm going to stick around with you even though you're ruining my life. Like, and the same, and actually, if we hold all of the stories to that standard, then I think lots of people would stop treating each other as badly. I don't think religious traditions would subjugate women in the same way, because if women could walk out without any penalty from any of the spaces that they're in, without any suffering, without having their children taken away from them, without them being oppressed in multiple different directions, then the religious traditions would be having to work a lot harder than they are right now. But instead, they brainwash them with duty and vows and, like, archetypes of, like, what it means to be a good woman and a good mother and this kind of thing, and they're trapped in that. And so when you say, like, what, you just walk away from a relationship when it's not working, I'm like, if both parties are taking responsibility for themselves and the relationship and it's not working, then please walk away.
I do think at the centre of this entire conversation, where it's doubt, belief, questioning, what do you believe, evidence-based, the centre of the conversation is who gets to validate what someone believes, who gets to decide what is counted as truth. Is evidence-based. Because if you look back at, like, indigenous cultures, what they believed for them was real and was their truth. Lack of evidence, lack of science, but also big parts of the Bible were not told for the sake of accuracy.
Well, the issue is, though, that I have is, I don't think I really have a problem with people having their spiritual beliefs. The issue I have is that some religions will tell you this is the truth, and that truth claim is a problem because you don't have evidence that your belief system is true. And I think that's where the issues come in. People will be on the street telling you, you need to give your life to Christ. Why? Because the Bible said that Jesus died for your sins and you need to go to heaven. It's like, but what is your truth and evidence for that? Why would I go to hell for that? Do you know what I mean? That's where it gets techie.
Could you give them grace in saying that that is their truth for them?
Yeah, but
that is their avenue for their belief.
The issue is not people having their things that, you know, make them, help them, whatever. I don't have a problem with that. My issue is when it comes...
When they push it onto you.
When they push it onto you. But the problem is as well with the religious framework, it does tell you that you need to tell people that.
Where does it tell you that?
Obviously in the Bible, you need to...
No, but I need you to say...
Well, not the fact check, and you said, I need the receipt.
Because you did say, within the religious framework, it tells you to do that.
Evangelism is a big part of Christianity. Do you agree?
Evangelism is a big part of Christianity. Within that framework, what does it tell you to force people or to point people into the truth?
Not to force people, but evangelism is a big part of it.
Absolutely.
To go out into the world and speak and tell the gospel.
This is what we see those clips on Instagram and TikTok where someone's on the street and they're preaching the word and they're, you know, going in. And sometimes they get into arguments, and I really dislike that whole framework. And here's why: because the Bible, especially Jesus. And when I talk about Christianity, I'm always focusing solely on what Jesus is saying. I'm like, let's forget a lot of the Old Testament. Let's leave that out for now.
But can you do that? Are you allowed to?
Let me land. Let's leave that out for now. Well, yes, can we do that? Yes, because Jesus did that. Jesus a lot of times was saying it was said, but I'm saying this now.
Yeah, okay.
So Jesus was changing the framework a lot in regards to his teaching. When it comes to evangelism, the only thing Jesus requires us to do as evangelists is to be a witness. That's the word he uses, witness.
Right, okay.
Witness simply means you speak on your experience.
Okay.
You speak on the witness is not in the court to present evidence. That's the prosecutor, that's the lawyer's job. I'm not God's lawyer. Heaven did not hire me as God's attorney. My job is to simply speak on my experience.
But you are supposed to be a representation of him, though.
And my representation for me is through the life that I live, the love that I give, and the light that I shine. That's my witness. That's my representation.
Do we? Because from what I'm drawing from this, and I always think this when I have these conversations, is that do we just think that there's just certain things in the universe that we're not going to be able to ever explain?
Yeah,
I think that's the entry point for conversation about God. Is that first of all, we're never going to get a scope on this. We're never going to completely understand this. We are all on this earth trying to figure this thing out. Coming from a place of certainty closes the door to conversation.
Sometimes I would sit in the position of saying that God is the name we give to everything that we cannot explain. And that once we start to be able to explain it, we bless it, we're grateful for it, we thank God's creation, but we don't hold it up with that sense of awe. But the reason I paused is actually because I was thinking about the cultural experience of religion, especially the Abrahamic faith, often includes violence, includes the subjugation of women, and when we return all the time to scripture, to what we can know, right, or what we think we can know, then it's nice. There's comfort there, right? There's some comfort there. But to discount the story that has arisen from this like little seed of something that may have been true is, to me, to not really be witnessing the full story of Christ. Like, Christ's story is also that people have mistold his story.
Absolutely.
And like, I think about how Christ wanted, like, kind of offered himself as the final scapegoat. So often people who are scapegoated in society is because people have told stories about them that are not true, you know?
Absolutely.
And so it's like, it happens in Islam a lot as well when people talk about this position of women in Islam, right? They go, oh, but in the Quran, you know, blessed book, this happens and this happens. I'm like, yeah, bro, like, is that what happens the rest of the time? The same thing with Judaism, same thing in Buddhism, same thing everywhere. And so I think if we're going to bear witness, right, to the thing we cannot know, to the experience of God in our lives, then let's bear witness to the full story and not just the parts of it that are convenient, that help us to confirm our position.
I want to know, if you discover tomorrow that you were wrong about everything, what would you change?
Oh.
I mean, I love when I find out that I'm wrong about something because it gives me something new to learn. Like, I'm like, great. Like, that's wonderful. I don't think that. I trained as a performer, and so being given feedback is very valuable. Right. Like, if someone says that step was in the wrong place and you got your line wrong, you're like, thanks for actually noticing that I'm doing something and giving me feedback. And and it's in Islam as well, that like people encourage each other to do better by saying you did this wrong. So when I'm like, oh, I was wrong about that, like, you know, I see that as like an invitation to go and learn more. But then
I guess, Laura, for you, you would be the closest to it actually happening. I was in something and I felt like it was wrong, and now I'm not. So what would you change?
Honestly, I think people don't understand that with deconstructing a faith that you've been indoctrinated in since the day you came into this world is a very life-changing process. So I had to go through, I don't know if ego death is the right word here, but a serious stage in life where I actually felt very depressed because I realized, wow, something that I've put my whole life into, poured my identity into, isn't real anymore. It took a lot of time for me to rebuild myself, get to a point where I create a new framework, and I now see myself as the agent that, you know, who's in control of my life. Because of that, I actually think it takes a lot of humility, I will say, to deconstruct. Absolutely. And I think that's obviously something that I've also seen with you, Shem, like being humble enough to say, I may be wrong, actually. And going through that and actually seeing it through and not turning back when you're like, oh, nah, this is gonna be too much for me. It takes a lot. It's gonna be hard. Did
you ever feel like a sense of shame? Because you come from a...
Yes, shame, actually, no, I wouldn't say shame. I would say a lot of guilt.
Okay.
Because one, you see, especially, you know, in the Black community, most people are religious. So you see everyone is around, everyone is following this, and you're just thinking, what is wrong with me? Why can't I see, like, I want to go back to where I was. And a lot of people are like, oh, you need to pray more, you need to do this more. But on not knowing that I was praying to God, like, peace, peace, peace. Like, I want to go back. I want to go back to the time where, like, things were secure and I didn't have all these thoughts. It's a lot easier to live life when you have almost like a manual that's been given to you to do so. So that was my experience, and I realized, okay, this shame, this guilt, or all the other negative feelings is just part of the phase. And then at the end of it, I actually felt better, more free. That kind of, you know, that something's gonna happen to you if you don't, if you're not religious, and all that fear-based teaching, I guess you're talking about, kind of just dissipated. And obviously I'm now living in a space where I have a clear mind. I'm able to just live my life. When bad things happen, it's not because someone was out there punishing me. I did something wrong today, the devil's on my case. It's just because life happened, and I'm able to have the tools to deal with that.
Shem, what about you?
I'm an academic at heart.
Okay.
So I'm always learning. I'm always being corrected. I'm in constant pursuit of knowledge. Sometimes I have to admit when I'm just not going to know. But if ever I'm wrong, and I have been many a times in my own faith, there's certain things that I used to believe in Christianity, in my faith, that I no longer subscribe to or adhere to. I quickly identify where I'm wrong and look for what's right. Like you said, it takes a lot of humility, but there's also a lot of grace in being wrong. I think you have to admit your own humanity and your own limitations there.
In your situation, does faith ever trump logic for you? Like you could research something and you're like, oh, okay. And then you're like, no, I don't want to, I'm going to believe that what I believe in is what is correct.
I think a lot of times within Christianity, and I hear this a lot, which really annoys me, is, faith is like better than logic, or you can't put logic in place of faith. And I feel like that is so ignorant. I feel like it's so ignorant.
I hear that all the time.
As if God did not give us logic.
Right.
So I don't think the two are ever in competition of each other. I don't think the two are ever separate from each other. I think one can have faith and logic. I think my faith oftentimes is informed by logic and not the absence of. If something doesn't make sense, that doesn't mean it doesn't make faith. I think faith sometimes is informed. A lot of our faith is informed, so it has to depend on logic.
But do you not feel like that cognitive dissonance sometimes kicks in? Because I think sometimes that's something that we can't... Because when I was, like, religious, I went to university, you know, I'm studying, I'm not dull, but at the same time, when it came to really questioning things, there would always be that cognitive dissonance that will come in, obviously unknowingly at the time, because I was religious, so I wouldn't know what my brain is doing to kind of bypass that logic. But obviously, when you actually give yourself the space to think and, you know, really decide whether this actually makes sense, then the faith obviously is scary, but then you have to let the logic kind of come over the face. I sometimes, like, obviously, no offense, but I do think when I see people who are religious, I do think a lot of times faith is taking a bigger, is taking control more than the logic. Sometimes, just being honest.
Thank you, honestly. I really enjoyed that chat, and I could speak about this all day because it's something that I'm quite passionate about as well, and I've taken a bit from everyone. I really have. So thank you for coming, and hopefully you come again. And guys, you know what to do. Join me next time to see who walks into my bar. If you've really enjoyed the conversation, why don't you like, comment and subscribe so you don't miss out who's coming into the bar next?